Hello, I'm Matt Tanney, Director of Athletics at Western Illinois University, and today we are here for Athletic Director U, and we're talking with Liz Darger, SWA at BYU, and Joeleen Akin from Georgia Tech University. And so today we're going to talk about the role of the SWA and your experiences with that. So I'll just open it up here. For either one of you, if you could talk a little bit about what elements you think make for a quality relationship between an SWA and an athletic director.
I think one of the most important parts is open communication, and that ability to be able to talk through everyday issues, tough issues, recognizing that different perspectives are valuable and lead to better decisions. That's one of the things I really value about my relationship with Tom Holmoe, my athletic director, is it is very much a consistent, open communication. I also think shared values. Tom is very student-athlete centered, and I am as well. And so whatever problems arise, whatever the issues are, knowing that we have that in common is really helpful. I would encourage anyone that is in their career as they look of who they might work for and work with. That's a really important consideration. We all hopefully have student athletes at the top of our minds and hearts. Tom really walks the walk with that, and that's helpful for us as we look to make decisions together. It's also really nice. Tom takes a great interest in my areas and responsibilities that he's given me, and he also asks me to take a great interest in his areas of responsibility. And so we don't make decisions in silos, and being able to communicate in a way where you feel like your insights are valued and considered. And it doesn't mean it always goes your way, but knowing that, feeling the empowerment of an athletic director to share your voice and your insights, I think has been very valuable in me being able to help Tom and ultimately help our student athletes.
Great, Joeleen.
I kind of piggyback what Liz says, and I will just add a couple things to that, because in my situation, our athletic director, Todd Stansberry, he was a student athlete at Georgia Tech. So he understands Georgia Tech, the rigor of the academic side of things. He played football there. He also inherited me. I was hired by the former athletic director. Second day on the job, he left. So we were fortunate to hire Todd. So what I've been trying to do in the last year and a half with him is really get to know Todd, understand his vision. And his vision is very similar to mine. His values are very similar to mine. He loves the student athletes. He's student athlete centered. So everything that we do is student athlete centered. And the great thing is that I oversee student athlete development. So that's been very valuable. And then the communication with us, building that trust, building that relationship with each other, being very transparent is very important. So that's...
Okay. Liz, you mentioned in your comment there joint decision making.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you feel that is to the role, and how involved are you in that at BYU?
I think it's very important. Research shows that as you get more diverse voices in a room, the better decisions that are typically made. And I feel very grateful to work at an institution where my voice is valued and is heard. And I am one of only a few women in our athletic department, but I work with some very remarkable men who are very considerate of my viewpoint and want to know it and want to understand it, recognizing that it will help us all make better decisions. So I think it's absolutely critical. And Tom really, from day one, as I transitioned from being a coach to an administrator, empowered me that way, which was really nice to feel like from that very first day, he wanted to know my thoughts. He wanted my help in making important decisions.
Okay. So you mentioned the research. The NCAA recently came out with a new report on the role of the SWA, and I think some interesting insights in that report. One of them was maybe a little bit of a lack of clarity on the role and a disconnect between athletic directors and SWA. I think something like 92% of athletic directors report understanding the role, but only 45% of SWAs report having an athletic director that understands the role. So could you both comment on that maybe, and where you think some of that disconnect comes from, and what are some steps that can be taken with athletic directors to close that gap?
That's a really good question, and I think that it's up to the athletic director and maybe the SWA to try to navigate through any things that are not clear. I know with Todd, he is wherever he's been, he has valued the role of the SWA, and he's so inclusive, and he empowers so much. That's very helpful. What I see a lot of times is that people in the athletic department don't understand the role of the SWA. I'm introduced a lot as she's the senior women's administrator and she oversees all the women's sports. And so although Todd understands it and so do the other executive team members, trying to educate the entire athletic department on the role of the SWA has been the challenge.
Sure.
Where I sit.
Okay.
And it's a very similar experience for me. And BYU had separate men's and women's athletic departments until just about 13 years ago. And so there are still many people, whether in the athletic department, the campus community, or the community, that are still understanding what that means and looks like. And so similarly, within the department or campus, that think that I oversee the women's sports, and it's hard to find a great way to navigate that,
Right.
And to find the appropriate way in circumstances to clarify. And certainly I didn't feel like my first month on the job was the right time typically to have some of those conversations. It was more important to build really good, strong relationships of trust. But I do hope that that report can be helpful for presidents, athletic directors, SWAs, and the NCAA to be able to clarify the role, clarify the designation, and for all involved. I agree. I have an athletic director that absolutely understands, and a president that understands, and I understand. But what is the best way to re-educate athletic departments? And one of my concerns from the report was how few student athletes understand.
Right.
And that's an area where I hope we can have some education, whether it's through our SAC, but I would love to see some guidance from the NCAA on how we can improve in that area.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with that because, like you said, the student athletes, they're unclear, and it just makes for it to be even more difficult trying to help people understand the role.
Sure.
And one of the things that's interesting is I think even among SWAs or women in athletic administration in general, there's a diversity of thought and an opinion about it. There are some that feel like it's outdated, it's not needed.
Right.
And there are others that feel like, oh, it's absolutely needed. 25% of Division I schools have 0 or 1 woman in senior athletic administration. And so to me, that's 25% of our Division I schools that it's likely not a budgetary issue. It's not but that there is a need to have a different perspective is just invaluable, not in talking about women's athletics, but in talking about athletics in general, student athlete welfare in general. You oversee student athlete development and the different lived experience that women have, whether their own experience growing up in athletics or as a coach or administrator is valuable. And so I think there is a great value in the designation, but I also recognize that others feel like it's outdated or perhaps is holding women back.
And I will say there's so many women that say, I strive to be an SWA. Why stop there? why should that be the only thing you strive for? Because there's not many of those positions. You should strive for more.
Sure.
So.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about your own personal experiences. And Joeleen, you were a Division III athletic director for a number of years before returning to Georgia Tech. How has that experience as a Division III athletic director shaped your role and your job now?
That's a really good question. It's been, I will say that when I was at Georgia Tech before, when I left, I was director of marketing, so I was focused on a specific area. And then when I went to a Division III institution and I was the head basketball coach and the athletic director, then became commissioner, associate dean, I was given so many more tools than I would have should I have stayed at Georgia Tech for that many more years. So, you know, I coached. I can relate to coaches more. The coaches at Georgia Tech, they know that I get it because I was a coach. I oversaw athletic training. I oversaw everything. So I developed such a broad-based experience overseeing an athletic department, which I think helped me be a lot more marketable coming back to Georgia Tech. And I would not have had those experiences had I stayed at Tech doing what I was doing. Now, it's not an easy transition to make, that's for sure, but it was a good move for me in my career and with the family and stuff.
Very good. So Liz, you kind of had a little bit different path on the coaching side. So basketball coach for a number of years, and then you transitioned into the role. How has your coaching background and your coaching experience shaped your role?
It's been really helpful, like Joeleen said, in particular with relationships with coaches. They know I have been there, and I get it, and I understand the pressures they're under. I understand our changing millennial student athlete and how our coaches need to change and adapt with that. I understand the grind of recruiting and the long days of watching film and managing personalities and playing time, and that's been very helpful. The other piece that's been really helpful is relationships with student athletes. That is the most rewarding part of my job. My days are filled with lots of meetings, and it can be exhausting. Any touch point with a student athlete in my day is the best part of my day, whether it's saying hi to them and, you know, while they're at lunch, or whether it's an actual one-on-one meeting, or whether it's in a SAC meeting, or whatever it is. But because I coached and had that very close connection with student athletes, I actually feel like I get the best of both worlds in some ways now as an administrator. And a lot of that I give credit again to an athletic director that's student athlete centered, where I feel permission to take the time that is needed to really invest and get to know our student athletes and our coaches. But that piece coming from the coaching side has been very valuable. Our student athletes are ultimately why we are all doing this. And so to be able to have that perspective, that student athletes know too, that, okay, she gets it. She understands. That's been really helpful.
So as an athletic director, I feel like I miss out on some of those touch points with the student athletes, maybe a little more than I would like. And when you're having those conversations with the student athletes, obviously things come up. Different topics, different needs come up. How do you filter those needs, filter those particular things that come up in conversation, and then direct that to other resources in the department and or the athletic director?
To me, it feels similar to when I was an assistant coach, and you would have student athletes that would express things, and you had to be strategic or considerate about how you might share what is important to share with the head coach, and what are things that you can do within the coaching staff to help that particular student athlete. And I feel it's similar. When we hear needs right from the mouth of student athletes, those need to be taken seriously, and so there's not a lot that I filter from. From our athletic director, because he wants to know, in terms of understanding where we can meet needs through different resources. One of the things that I really do love about working at BYU is I do feel empowered to to help create opportunities myself with Tom's blessing. And so if we already have programming, if we already have things set up to help meet student-athlete needs better, then that's great. But if we don't, Tom will say, okay, let's create it, let's figure it out, come with some ideas and how can we make it better.
And something, Matt, to add to that, Liz, is so Todd has created what we call a captain's table. And so a designated leader or captain on a team, we get together 3 times a year and we have a meal, and it's the athletic director in the room, the sport supervisors in the room, and we have maybe a specific program, we have topics, but it's a chance for their voice to be heard right then and there, and it's been very powerful within the teams and within the room, and it's just been an amazing transformation. That's really been awesome, and it just shows that he's so student-athlete centered, because we are here for the student-athletes.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit more about the role itself and sport oversight and administrative responsibilities. How important do you feel in sort of the evolution of the SWA role is basketball oversight and even football oversight to that role?
Well, if let's see, within the last 6-9 months, let's see, Desiree Reed-Francis, she was hired at UNLV, and she oversaw football.
Sure.
That was important. She oversaw it also at Cincinnati. She worked with men's basketball when she was at Tennessee. And Carla Williams, who just was named the athletic director at Virginia, she oversaw football at Georgia. And I think it's vital. It can be hard to probably break into, but that's where you have an AD that trusts you, trusts your opinion. And you also have a really good relationship with maybe your football coach or your men's basketball coach, because I read that Mark Richt, when he was at Georgia, asked for Carla to oversee football. Yeah. To me, that's very powerful. Sure. And so as women, what are we doing to develop the relationship with the men's basketball coach, with the football coach? And there are some really easy things that you can do, and really, coaches just want you to listen. They just want to be heard, and they want to make sure that you are looking out for their interest, the best interest for the program. So I think it's important that the SWA oversees one or the other.
Okay. Liz, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would say that any time as an administrator, and I would say as an SWA, that you can have responsibility with men's basketball or football, whether it's sport oversight or touch points in other ways of being involved in important decisions, that's critical experience to gain. And it also, those are decisions that affect the whole athletic department, not just football and men's basketball, and so I've been grateful for opportunities from Tom to be involved in decision making in those two sports, recognizing the experience that it can give me and help me professionally, but also to help me better have more information to better inform in terms of how things affect the entire athletic department and all of our student athletes.
Sure. So last question here, and I just kind of be a little more forward-looking. And how do both of you see your roles, both on campus and then nationally, the role evolving? And what, obviously, the role obviously has a lot of great value to your departments. Is there additional value that the position can bring that maybe is not fully realized right now? And how do you just see that developing?
So I see it continuing to evolve. I just sat in on the session for the Presidential Pledge for Diversity and Inclusion, and I see the SWA role somewhat similar to the discussion that we just had. What are we doing to help the SWA or the designated person, and what does it look in the future? And I think that to me, it starts with the president as well as the athletic director and the executive staff. But I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. I still think people aren't sure what it's going to look like, but I think we can be very instrumental in that. And I think it starts with a healthy, transparent relationship between the athletic director and the SWA and the executive team.
Sure.
Because really, we're the executive team. No matter what the title,
Sure.
we're all working together. So it's an educational process that's, I think, continuing to evolve.
Okay.
And I would add to that, I think it will look different on different campuses. And I'm anxious to see, I'm really grateful for the NCAA for doing the research and putting the report together. It's outstanding. Even just the dialogue and discussion, it's already garnered, just even here this week and talking with folks, I think it's been excellent. And now I know the next steps are to come up with some action items and what do we think and what are some things we can do and how might it look. I feel a great sense of responsibility on my campus and my athletic department to involve more women in athletics and to find them early as student athletes and to find those that say, your job looks cool, I want to learn more about that. Sure. And say, you think it's cool, but let me show you, but let me show you the behind the scenes of what it really is. It's not just you see me on the sidelines and at games, but then to provide those opportunities for our young women in particular to hopefully keep them in coaching and consider administration. And so that's an area where I would love to get to the point where we feel like we don't need an SWA. I know some feel that already. I feel like we do need it. I would love to get to the point where I don't feel we need it, but I also know a lot of that is on me. What am I doing on my campus and my athletic department to help identify those that want a career in college athletics, and how can I help provide them opportunities early on to be exposed to different areas of athletics, to education, professional development, and networking and relationships to put them in positions to where whenever I retire, I hope there are 50 amazing applicants and it doesn't have to be this, who do you know, who can we get to apply, what do you think?
Right, because who are we mentoring? And that's the thing. There's so many, not just our student athletes, but so many women in the athletic department. What are we doing to help mentor them? To help them get to where they want to go. And I think that's very important too for the SWA role. And it's unfortunately doesn't happen as often as it should.